welcome to the show. This image, we kick off with oil, the Strait of Hormuz. This is arguably the most used clip on social media right now by almost every major news network, and it comes from Kpler. They've been tracking the movement of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. This is from February the 27th to March the 3rd, and you can see how there's almost no movement here of the major vessels. But U.S. President Trump has said that he will basically promise security for the vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz with a U.S. naval ship. And we're about to speak with one of the executives from Kpler about how practical that is, and also talking about what to look out for. So Matt Wright, he's a principal freight analyst with Kpler, and he joins us from London. Matt, good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. I wanted to get your take, Matt, on how practical it is for the U.S. naval vessels to be able to escort vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Trump announced on Tuesday evening that they were going to provide lower insurance and escort naval vessels. In reality, there's a lot more complications to this. The threat from Iran still remains very, very high. And using a naval escort is not actually really going to solve the problem en masse. We've got hundreds and hundreds of vessels trapped within the Mideast Gulf at the moment. As you said, the Strait of Hormuz is not officially closed. It is closed sort of de facto. And that is because the threat to vessels remains very high. We've had over 10 vessels hit across the Mideast Gulf and Gulf of Oman over the last few days. And the Iranian technology is very sophisticated. They're able to hit these vessels, and this is a genuine concern. The use of a naval escort could even be more risky because you could be attracting more attention to those vessels. The number of transits, as you showed from the map there on the screen, has really diminished. And this is because vessels have insurance, but they are concerned about the safety for their vessel. And Iran has specifically said that they will attack vessels if they attempt to pass by the Strait of Hormuz. So when we are hearing or seeing evidence of vessels moving through that stretch of water, a lot of the time what they're doing is they're turning off their AIS, which is their transponder, to try and hide their location. So it still remains a very, very high risk and complicated situation.
Now, we're showing that video now, again, from you guys. I wanted to read you a quote from the managing director of Precious Shipping PCL, Khalid Hashim. And Khalid was basically saying that lives at risk, vessels at risk, and that essentially responding to Trump's promise of getting a vessel through there, essentially they're going to need more of an assurance from the administration. And you mentioned insurance rates a moment ago. Trump is also claiming to provide a backstop for insurance. Do you have any idea of, I guess, how the U.S. could carry that out, what the costs could be, and since insurance rates are higher now?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to be clear, vessels remain insured. The maritime insurance industry is hundreds of years old and has been covering vessels throughout conflicts forever, back to the Napoleonic Wars and through the recent attacks in the Red Sea, in the Black Sea amid the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So there is no risk of vessels not being insured. There will be a premium. Vessels are now going to have to pay more if they're operating in that area. So Trump's announcement doesn't fundamentally change the insurance side of things. It is also unclear how that mechanism would work. But, I mean, if vessels are offered lower insurance, that is not necessarily going to incentivize them more to want to move in and out of the Mideast Gulf. And in regards to your quote, understandably, owners, seafarers, it is an incredibly stressful and difficult time. But at the moment, the market is fundamentally awaiting a de-escalation, and whether this is through diplomatic engagement between the U.S., Iran, and other Middle Eastern countries, there is fundamentally no mechanism for a sustained recovery in transits of the Strait of Hormuz without that. We need to see basically Iranian attacks come to an end, or some sort of diplomatic solution. But fundamentally at the moment, Iran holds the cards when it comes to making transits very, very difficult.
And I assume that's the leverage that they're going to hold on to. So that the video we've played, I mean, everyone's used this at this point, every major media house. I know the red dots on the video are supposed to be on your tracking image there, the larger vessels. What are the smaller blue and green ones? So what are those?
Yeah. Yeah, so the red will be tankers, and then we've also got cargo vessels that will be sort of dry. So the red ones, you can see the vast majority of vessels in and around the Middle East Gulf are tankers, which will be carrying crude, refined products, gas, chemicals, etc. The green ones are cargo vessels, so carrying commercial cargo, like dry bulk or other sort of roll-on vessels, in containers, etc. And then the other ones you've got blue would be passenger, and then there's a series of other smaller ones, service vessels, etc. But fundamentally, the vast majority of vessels in and around the area will be a tanker of some description.
Thank you for that, Matt. Now, I did get, we went to your the Kpler website, and there was a vessel status at the Strait of Hormuz. I want to just get some clarity on that table. You have in the Gulf, the status is continuing regional port calls, and there's 87 of them. So what does that mean? Help us clear that up. They're still able to move around, or how does that work?
Yeah, so within the Middle East Gulf, vessels are fundamentally sort of trapped, but we have seen a lot of vessels continue to load. The Middle East Gulf is primarily a load region. Yes, there's a lot of cargoes discharged there, including dry bulks. But most of them, so now what we've seen is over the period of the vessels that have been trapped, a lot of them have loaded and are now waiting. They are sort of laden with a cargo and looking to leave. Very few vessels, as you've seen, going in and out. When some vessels have been diverted, as you're showing there. So vessels that were previously looking to go into the region are now going elsewhere. But you saw on that map, there's a lot of vessels waiting outside the Middle East Gulf, in the Gulf of Oman. They're either anticipating some improvement in flows, but I think as I mentioned earlier, this is going to take weeks rather than days.
Now, my producer actually wanted me to ask you this about the Red Sea or using the Suez Canal through Egypt, because there's on your table you have outside the Gulf diverted to alternate ports, about 43 of them. So I think we were talking about this before you came on. I think the going through the Suez Canal or the Red Sea, that would be a longer, help us out, would that be a much longer journey and more expensive? And where are these 43 vessels that are diverted to alternate ports going?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and it depends on the market and the vessel. But let's focus on, say, the crude carriers, which account for the majority of trade in and out of the Middle East Gulf, and a lot of the attention is very focused on them, on the crude oil market. So with a lot of those crude barrels are trapped within the Middle East. However, because the only entrance and exit is the Strait of Hormuz from a seaborne point of view. However, there are some pipelines. So Saudi Arabia has a pipeline that travels from the east to the west to the Red Sea coast. So a lot of vessels are diverting to the Red Sea. And what they will do is they will pick up the cargo there instead of from within the Middle East Gulf and be able to take it. However, the Red Sea brings with it its own complications. The Houthis in Yemen have been attacked vessels over the last 3 or 4 years. We haven't seen attacks in a number of months. However, following the events over the weekend, the Houthis have announced that they will begin attacking vessels again. So that's increasing the risk for vessels wanting to operate in the Red Sea. So, it is, while, the Middle East Gulf remains the focal point, it's very much an unstable situation throughout the Middle East.
Wow, thanks for that, Matt. So what's the impact on oil production if vessels cannot offload? Does production essentially get shut down? Because I think there was some news about that in Iran, I think, or elsewhere. Can you help us with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for Saudi, so we'll leave Iran to a side. For Iraq, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, the huge oil producers in the region, there is a limit to onshore storage. So they are producing, there's a huge number of oil fields, they're producing crude, producing refined products. But the vessels in the Middle East Gulf, like I mentioned, are mostly full. Most of them are laden with cargoes. So there's a limit to how much more that they can keep producing if there are not vessels to come and pick it up. And if we haven't got new vessels arriving in the region, then it eventually we will start to see shut-ins, which is where production from certain fields across the Mideast Gulf just have to stop.
All right, Matt, final question for you. You've been really informative and really helpful. Well, I guess what's your outlook for oil prices? Do you guys at Kpler have an idea when this conflict could end and how much different it is from last year and so on? How do you see things playing out?
Yeah, so we do anticipate that there will be some return to transits, and that will come either through mediation or through, sustained U.S. attacks on Iran or depletion in Iranian missiles and drones, at which point transits will be able to resume. We do expect that to occur within the next few weeks. And as a result, then crude prices will start to weaken. And we expect crude to drop to sort of the mid-60s by April.
Matt Wright, Principal Freight Analyst at Kpler. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you.